Despite the fact that this hotel is 129 years old, there are a few occupants who have checked in but have never checked out. Those of you who are more uncomfortable may choose to travel to the hills in order to escape a city filled with dressed-up ghouls and goblins on Halloween, which is just around the corner. If you are also a person who gets worried when you see ghosts, you should stay away from the Fairmont Banff Springs Hotel. While staying at the Fairmont Banff Springs, you can come across any of the following spectral figures, which are just a few examples. She is even featured on her own stamp and coin, and the tale of the Ghost Bride goes back to the late 1920s. She is perhaps the most renowned of all the ghosts who reside at the Fairmont Banff Springs, and she is even featured on her own stamp and coin. According to the legend, on the day of the young couple's wedding, the bride, who was dressed in her bridal gown, made her way down one of the marble stairs that were located in the hotel. She was frightened by something, which resulted in her collapsing and falling. It has been said that she experienced a heel catch in the hem of her dress. Some others claim that her clothing came into contact with the flame of a candle. The bride sadly passed away on those stairs, regardless of the circumstances that led to her death. Since that time, both the employees of the hotel and the visitors have claimed seeing a figure in a veil wandering up and down the stairs, or seeing a figure in a wedding dress dancing in the ballroom above, yearning for the first dance she had with her husband that she never had. Since his demise in 1975, tales about Sam Macaulay, a kind old Scotsman who served as the hotel's top bellman throughout the 60s and 70s, have been passed around the establishment. Sam is said to be a kind of spirit that is helpful, and the most of the tales that include him mention some kind of assistance that he has offered to either the staff or the visitors. Two elderly ladies called the bell desk for help after discovering that their key would not function. This was one of the incidents that occurred. Due to the fact that the normal bellman was handling other responsibilities, he did not answer for 15 minutes. The door had already been unlocked by the time he arrived at their residence. According to one of the ladies, they were assisted by an elderly bellman who was wearing a plaid blazer. This bellman was a perfect match for Sam's description. There have been other accounts of visitors seeing apparitions and feeling cold spots on the 6th, 7th, or 9th levels of the hotel. These accounts include people who have seen Sam haunting his former workplace, which is now a guest room, which is located on the mezzanine floor. Even though they would prefer not to provide room numbers, the staff has said that there are certain rooms that are haunted. Some guests have said that while they were sleeping, the pillows were pulled out from beneath their heads, and some have even alleged that they were forced off the bed by an unknown entity. Whatever ghosts or spirits are lingering in this chamber, it is reasonable to assume that if they are unable to find peace, they are determined to ensure that you are unable to do the same. Another room that will remain nameless has a narrative that can be told in a variety of ways, but the primary idea is that it was the location where a whole family was killed, and ever since then, visitors who have been staying in that room have reported being roused from their sleep by the sound of screaming. When they switched on the lights, they would see bloody handprints on the mirror where they were standing. Depending on who is telling the tale, the handprints either vanished before the hotel workers had a chance to wipe them, or they chose not to come off at all. On the other hand, if you go to the level where the room is supposed to be, you will discover that it has been totally covered and is inaccessible from the corridor. This is either because the room is said to be haunted, or because it is being renovated, depending on who you ask. According to rumors, the maternity wing at Grace Hospital in Calgary is reportedly haunted by the soul of Maudine Riley, also known as Maud Keane Riley for short. According to the legend, Maudine's family was the owner of the property on which the proposed hospital was subsequently constructed. Unfortunately, Maudine passed away while she was giving birth. Even her kid did not make it through the birthing process. It is stated that the wretched form of her soul takes up residence in the maternity unit, and when she is seen there, she is supposed to be cradling her child. There is a vast range of human emotions that may be experienced at hospitals, ranging from extreme happiness to extreme misery. As a result, many people think that hospitals are often claimed to be haunted. The question remains, however, whether Maudine or Maud, Keene, Riley is the one who haunts. Having spent her childhood in Perth County, Ontario, Maud, Keene, Riley went on to get her teaching certification from the Ontario Normal School. She obtained a teaching post at Nose Creek School in Calgary in 1903 when she had completed her education and received her certification. She wed Harold Riley in 1907, and the couple went on to have 3 children together. During one of the deliveries, both the mother and the infant were so near to passing away that it is reported that Maud made a pledge to herself that she would always look out for the well-being of children and the families on whom they were raised. Could this be the fact that the myth exists? Maud's initial participation in the community was with the local Council of Women, which was comprised of human rights advocates such as Emily Murphy and Henrietta Muir Edwards. This organization was successful in lobbying for a number of significant improvements, including the ability to vote for women in 1916 and the right to dower rights for women. Following her involvement with this organization, Maud went on to become involved with over 30 organizations in the province of Alberta, such as the Alberta Federation of Women, the Calgary Playground Association, the Canadian Council on Child Welfare, and the Foothills Provincial General Hospital Board. She gained valuable experience on the subject of activism through her involvement with this group. The work that she did in the area of women's rights, and in particular children's rights, was steadfast and comprehensive. She investigated everything from the need of appropriate nutrition to the importance of moral decency. The phrase, "Children should be well born, well treated, well housed, well fed, and well taught," was one of Maud's favorite sayings throughout her lifetime. She shone a great deal of resolve as she persistently pushed legislators until they made concessions for her causes. These concessions included the pasteurization of milk, free hospitalization for maternity, family courts, and family allowances, all of which were designed to ensure that children received adequate care. Maud was a contributor to the establishment of the Calgary Child Welfare Society in 1918. In 1923, the organization evolved into the Alberta Council on Child and Family Welfare. This would be her finest accomplishment, which would result in enormous changes to the quality of care that is accessible to families and children in Alberta. Unopposed, she served as the organization's president from 1923 to 1962. One of her latter accomplishments was pushing for the establishment of family courts, which would allow juveniles to be tried independently from adults. It was Maud Riley's dogged determination that led to the establishment of a significant number of the social services that are now considered to be standard in Alberta. Maud Riley died unexpectedly in 1962, only a few months before she was scheduled to be awarded an honorary doctorate degree in law from the University of Alberta Institution of Research. It is widely acknowledged that she was a pioneer in the field of social work in Alberta. The story of a lady who was hacked to pieces and burnt in the furnace of a building in the northeastern part of Edmonton does not deter people from going to the structure. In point of fact, it motivates them. When Halloween rolled around, the bed and breakfast that had been converted from a luxury apartment building in 1912 was completely full with people who were eager to encounter the spirit of the lady who had been murdered. The co-owner and custodian of La Bohème, which is located at 6427 112 Avenue, Mike Comeau, said that, "People just love it." The original custodian of the building is said to have slain his wife and then dragged her down 3 flights of stairs, as said by Comeau, according to their mythology. It is said that he dismembered her and then burnt her corpse in the furnace using the term, "the word." The original coal-fired boiler that is claimed to have been the location of the horrible murder is still in operation, despite the fact that it has been converted to gas. Many overnight visitors claim that there is a ghost that haunts the creaking flooring antique-style chambers, despite the fact that the reality of the tragic murder is unknown and there are no records of it at the municipal archives. According to a frequent client who was sleeping in Suite 7, which is reputed to be the most haunted room, his bed rose straight off the ground during the winter of the previous year. I was screaming, "Stop!" and I was slapping myself to make sure I was awake, recalled Larry Finson, a businessman from Winnipeg who specializes in advertising. Another instance occurred when a female worker was washing laundry in the basement, which was barely lit and located close to the furnace room. She felt someone touch her. According to Como, she was so terrified that she rushed up the stairs screaming and never returned before she disappeared. The author Barbara Smith included a description of the bed and breakfast in her book More Ghost Stories of Alberta, which was published in 1996. Although she is unaware of the murder story, she was there at La Bohème in the spring of 1995 and observed the mysterious event that took place around that time. Smith said that the lid of the sugar bowl disappeared from the dish and landed on the table, while she inquired about the haunted nature of the building from the person who had previously owned it. Finson, who identified himself as a skeptic but eventually became a believer, pointed out that there's a ghost there. The ghost is not going to hurt you, but if it wants to, it will make you more anxious than you already are. However, the story of a lady who was hacked to pieces and burnt in the furnace of a building in the northeastern part of Edmonton does not deter people from going to the structure. In point of fact, it motivates them. When Halloween rolled around, the bed and breakfast that had been converted from a luxury apartment building in 1912 was completely full with people who were eager to encounter the spirit of the lady who had been murdered. The co-owner and custodian of La Bohème, which is located at 6427 112 Avenue, Mike Como, said that people just love it. The original custodian of the building is said to have slain his wife and then dragged her down 3 flights of stairs, as said by Como, according to their mythology. It is said that he dismembered her and then burnt her corpse in the furnace, using the term, the word. The original coal-fired boiler that is claimed to have been the location of the horrible murder is still in operation, despite the fact that it has been converted to gas. Many overnight visitors claim that there is a ghost that haunts the creaking, flooring, antique-style chambers, despite the fact that the reality of the tragic murder is unknown, and there are no records of it at the municipal archives. According to a frequent client who was sleeping in Suite 7, which is reputed to be the most haunted room, his bed rose straight off the ground during the winter of the previous year. I was screaming, "Stop!" and I was slapping myself to make sure I was awake, recalled Larry Finson, a businessman from Winnipeg who specializes in advertising. Another instance occurred when a female worker was washing laundry in the basement, which was barely lit and located close to the furnace room. She felt someone touch her. According to Como, she was so terrified that she rushed up the stairs screaming and never returned before she disappeared. The author Barbara Smith included a description of the bed and breakfast in her book More Ghost Stories of Alberta, which was published in 1996. Although she is unaware of the murder story, she was there at La Bohème in the spring of 1995 and observed the mysterious event that took place around that time. Smith said that the lid of the sugar bowl disappeared from the dish and landed on the table while she inquired about the haunted nature of the building from the person who had previously owned it. Finson, who identified himself as a skeptic but eventually became a believer, pointed out that there's a ghost there. The ghost is not going to hurt you, but if it wants to, it will make you more anxious than you already are. Bridge has ghost tales. Unexpectedly dying following a routine appendectomy haunts Lethbridge's Galt Museum, previously the hospital. The Bowman Arts Centre, previously the Bowman School, has a ghost of a molested Chinese girl in the ladies' restroom. The oldest Western Canadian theater, Fort Macleod's Empress Theater, is said to contain a ghost. Alberta has more brutal deaths than ghosts. Whoop-up country was 1869, 1874, Lethbridge. Blackfoot traders on the Oldman and St. Mary's rivers obtained firewater liquor, repeating rifles, and other products from American merchants. Firewater, a nasty concoction of American whiskey, river water, chewing tobacco, Jamaica ginger, blackstrap molasses, red pepper, lye soap, red ink, and strychnine, killed many Indians. Others who traded everything for alcohol died from starvation or weather. Many died in whiskey-fueled family and friend fights. The 1870 Lethbridge Belly River battle killed hundreds of Indians. A terrible smallpox pandemic occurred in 1869. Lethbridge and the Great Plains were plagued with smallpox in 1837-1838, which the Blackfoot recalled. After burying their final dead in 1838, the Blackfoot called the location Akainiskwi, meaning many died. In 1850s grasslands east of the Cypress Hills, 7 blood warriors stole Cree horses. The party was led by young, affluent, courageous Heavy Collar. The party returned home after discovering nothing in southwest Saskatchewan's plains. They followed Bull's Head Creek, now Ross Creek, west through the Cypress Hills to Medicine Hat on the South Saskatchewan. Heavy Collar said he would discover friendly blood camps and horses to bring back for his pedestrian friends while camping on a hill overlooking Seven Persons Creek, which meets Bull's Head Creek before flowing down the river. His comrades would meet him at Belly Buttes, the western foot of the Blood Summer campsite, without horses. Heavy Collar moved west upriver. By Cutbank, he killed one of 3 buffalo. He wrapped the corpse and loaded most of the meat onto his horse, leaving the remainder for his pals. Eaten fire-roasted meat. Knowing the risks of solitary travel, he left his tent and traveled upriver at night, leaving the fire blazing. If ambushed, his flames would kill. Heavy Collar carefully hid his tracks upriver before Lethbridge. The moon guided him to a nearby coulee's soft grass for camping. Blood stayed up 24/7. While sleeping, he heard something odd. Nothing emerged from darkness. He believed a daring opponent was generating difficulty. Fearing scrutiny, he carried a gun. Heavy Collar was startled to find himself sleeping beside a Blackfoot woman's bones in the morning. The blood warrior thought her arrival meant death. Heavy Collar crossed the river scared. Late today, storms developed. Heavy Collar slept after a downpour. He settled on a river island after building a shelter and lighting a fire. He heard an owl whistle amid the rain and lightning. Blackfoot regarded owls dangerous. Blackfoot legend says ghosts speak like owls at night. Cold, hefty collar. While hiding, Heavy Collar heard something unusual. Through the woods. It became closer as I listened. The sounds came from someone traversing the flames outside his shelter. Heavy Collar shook. The fire ended tall and thin. White. Covered. It stretched its long, skeleton legs toward the fire to warm itself. "Who are you?" Heavy Collar muttered. A few neck hairs stood on end, and cold perspiration ran down his back. Silent figure. He felt its long, bony legs. While holding his firearm, Heavy Collar pulls back with white knuckles. "Who are you?" he repeated. "Tell me, human. Ghost, depart gently." That guy remained mute. Again, it extended its pale, skeletal legs at him. Heavy Collar targeted. He said, "You won't speak or leave. Perhaps this will dissuade you." He fell into darkness shot. A frightening cry was heard by Heavy Collar. Ghost Lady shouted, "Heavy Collar! You shot me! There's no hiding from me!" Too much for daring young. Heavy Collar raced all night in the rain after wading to shore. Before sunrise, he saw the Belly Buttes, where he would meet pals. He slept under a cottonwood, exhausted. He woke up rejuvenated after hours of relaxation. He thought he defeated the ghost lady at Belly Buttes. Friend of Heavy Collar defended adjacent hills. 6 Bloods gathered at Belly Buttes before their lord. 2 individuals approached the Belly Buttes from afar, so the Indian called pals. Heavy Collar emerged as Bloods approached. A lady, following. Perhaps their monarch abducted a wife from another tribe. The Bloods chuckled. Heavy Collar considered keeping or giving her. They smiled as the warrior and his female companion descended a coulee. The other side had a thick collar. Friends climbed. Heavy Collar, where's your woman? A courageous questioned, pointing to the lowest coulee. Taking her away? Where did you find her? Inquired another. What tribe is she? Heavy Collar feared the ghost woman's pursuit. He informed his pals about his terrifying ghost experience the night before. Bloods trusted him. They investigated the coulee. After the unusual lady went, moccasin footprints were on the muddy coulee bottom. His story was believed. While journeying, 7 Blackfoot met a tiny blood gang, stayed overnight. That night, Heavy Collar dreamt about the white ghost. She condemned his shooting. She advised against being shot or taking an opponent's pistol in combat. The spirit forbade him from returning to her bones. That curse haunted Heavy Collar forever. No one resisted his war parties. Never fired or caught. Blood refused to fight or raid with Heavy Collar, believing he had poor medicine. Heavy Collar fought for chiefdom his entire life. Prior to Heavy Collar, Montanans traded alcohol from Oldman River locations. Heavy Collar's band traveled to these liquor forts because the Bloods enjoyed them. Old Indian couldn't return to Whoop-Up country, where he discovered Ghost Woman's bones. This tired old warrior led them. The blood party landed safely, and the men changed buffalo robes in a whiskey fort. After dealing that night, some young blood warriors became intoxicated. Many fired their new repeating rifles to celebrate. Drunkenly, Blood shot the camp randomly. After being shot in the back, Heavy Collar died quickly. Phantom Lady avenged. South of Granville Mall, Vogue Theater opened in 1941. Theaters hosted concerts. The theater closed in 1988 due to low sales. Completely renovated, it reopened in 1991. Enhanced lighting and sound. Vogue features live music today. A stern, dark-haired creature stalks Vogue Theater. His stage, catwalk, projection booth, and basement hallway appearances. The ghost has been seen among the audience near the stage. Many co-workers have seen the ghost. Few saw him in the small hallway. The haunted highway mocks this scary tunnel. Ghosts smash hallway doors. In 1994-1997, Bill Allman was Vogue Theater house manager and general manager. He spent 6 months there in 2001. Multiple ghosts visit Allman in the theater. The first gathering was summer 1994. I was locking up the basement carpentry room and got that distinct feeling that someone was behind me, Allman says. I turned and saw a 3-dimensional shadow pass the door. I raced into the hall alone. Then I left the theater fast. Maybe I set a speed record. A month or two later, Beatles parody band Revolver added drums. He heard a bass drum kick and snare from below as Allman mounted the stage stairs. As he faced the stage, the music stopped. The place was empty. Long did he wonder whether his mind was playing tricks on him that day. Solid, booming drum sets. He heard truth. But it wasn't the ghost of Buddy Rich, Allman says. Poor play. 1 or 2 days after the drumming incident, Allman performed again. A few months before, he saw the same three-dimensional gray shadow downstairs, 7 or 8 rows from stage. Trying lessened the shadow. Some saw the ghost, but not all man. The 1995 Vogue Theatre play, Unforgettable. This performance honored Nat King Cole. Allman gave a guy and his psychic girlfriend an informal tour a week before the show. A projector booth was there. A week later, Allman's friend informed him his girlfriend saw a young, black-haired, stern person on an old projection booth chair. She sensed his fury as he faced them. He collapsed. Neither Allman nor his friend noticed. Supporting actor Shane McPherson encountered the ghost 2 or 3 weeks after shooting Unforgettable. On November 14, 1995, McPherson danced Route 66 at Vogue Theatre. Allman watched from the house's rear soundboard. Shane dropped his cane mid-song. He blew his dance steps and lines, Allman says. I went downstairs during break to find Shane in his dressing room. I asked what happened, and he said, I don't know if you're going to believe what I'm about to tell you. McPherson said, Allman, he saw a man evacuate the first row stage left fire exit into the audience floor while performing. The blank-faced stranger departed after seeing McPherson. The sight scared McPherson, weakening his act. McPherson characterized him as youthful, 30-ish, black-haired, honest, and informal. No dinner jacket. McPherson's tale chilled Allman. Why? His friend's girlfriend saw a ghost weeks before, according to McPherson. Okay, we have a presence, Allman said. The ghost appeared to theater worker David Ron the next day. The theater closed, so he took the stage. He glanced up to find someone at the projection booth doorway. A clean-shaven man with short black hair, dark eyebrows, and chiseled features emerged from the darkness. The apparition vanished as Rown and others stared. Something passed Ron on another catwalk above the throng and touched his right shoulder. Ron trembled at the sudden coolness. He walked alone. Ghosts return often. A box office worker noticed a lone visitor in the foyer in July 1996. She turned as a shadow ascended the balcony. Nylon's bassist Arnold Robinson met in 2000. His changing room was approached. He sensed presence in his dressing room. Robinson dared say, "If you want to hang out, that's cool." Vogue featured 2 early 2000s psychic mediums. Near stage-left fly gallery. Both fell heavily. Accident victims may have died or been severely injured. Not confirmed by Bill Allman. He and colleagues found no 1990s theater fatalities or injuries. Allman appreciated the Vogue theater atmosphere despite arriving. He's usually in staff-only areas. Together around the tunnel entrance to the ancient staff quarters, listening to the kilted tour guide tell a story of a previous employee who continued to work long after his shift was done. There were over 50 individuals in this particular group. There was a gathering of individuals who oohed and awed as the narrative of the night watchman, who paces the grounds as he did in life, was recounted inside the cramped confines of the chamber. The room was very darkly lighted, with the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. At the Algonquin Resort in St. Andrews, there are so many ghosts that they have their very own tour, which lasts for an hour and takes place twice a day. On the 9th of July, 2023, Greg was the one who took the initiative to share the tales of the resort that had been overlooked and had made their way into the very foundation of the establishment. The night watchman was a security guard who was responsible for ensuring the safety of the hotel after the sun had set. He was a resident of the staff housing, and it is said that he died suddenly, unexpectedly while sleeping one night. Greg offered to turn out the lights in the subterranean tunnel and stated, "However, he did get up and he still roams the halls to these days as a ghost." Greg was referring to the fact that he was going to turn off the lights. You may tell he is close by if you hear the sound of keys jingling. The ghost walk at the Algonquin Resort is also an opportunity to explain the history of the resort, which has been located on the hill overlooking St. Andrews by the Sea since the year 1889. The majority of the original structure was destroyed by fire on April 11, 1914, with the exception of the painter side, the kitchen wing, and the tower that was situated on the northwestern side of the main building. Additionally, a piano and the bell table were preserved after the fire, and both of these items are located in the lobby of the resort, or in close proximity to it. Greg disclosed to the audience that he would not take the risk of running into a burning building in order to rescue a piano. Nevertheless, the bellhop placed his life in danger in order to save some strings. As he continued his explanation that the piano plays by itself, Greg stated, "It's crazy, and this thing's pretty heavy." He said this while placing his hand on top of the piano. When guests who have spent the night in rooms 240 through 260 on the second floor check in with the concierge, they are informed that there is a piano playing in the restaurant. They come down in the night saying, "Hey, there's a piano playing, and can you please have them stop because we're trying to sleep?" Greg remembered. "If you could please have them stop playing?" Although we are certain that we are able to do it, the piano is locked. We are unable to engage in it. The resort was reopened in 1915 with its present form, which was a Tudor-style structure with a red roof. In addition to that, it became the location for marriages. And what kind of hotel would be considered complete if it did not include the specter of a bride who had been abandoned? A young woman who was about to marry a fisherman is the subject of one of these stories. He embarked on a voyage away from land the day before the wedding. The captive audience was informed by Greg that, "For all of you males, that is not a good thing to do a day before a wedding, because this gentleman did not return." It is unknown to us whether he was wandering aimlessly at sea or if he just deserted the ship because he did not want to return and marry this particular girl. Since it was only natural for the bride to feel upset over being abandoned at the altar, it is stated that she shed tears throughout the whole day and into the night of her wedding in room 473. Guests who were concerned about the young bride-to-be urged the staff to check on her, and the bellman discovered that she had passed away. Greg remarked, "They don't know if it was from a broken heart or suicide." He went on to say that each couple that spends the night in the room would argue and not agree on how pleasant their night's stay was, due to the fact that they are unable to determine the cause of death. There are at least 3 more ghosts that are supposed to occupy the rooms and hallways inside the Algonquin that was reconstructed in 1915. The night watchman is the only spirit that is reported to be there. As a result of the many outcomes that may occur during a wedding night, the tour advances to the next ghostly intruder on the premises. Greg escorted the party into the sub-basement of the resort, where he displayed photographs from the facility's history. Supposedly, one of them is keeping the spirit of a little kid called Ben hidden away. The bellhop, who was 19 years old at the time, supplied the following information. This little boy Ben is 3 years old, hanging out on the 4th floor in his room, throwing his red ball against the wall. Despite the fact that he was only 3 years old at the time, he raced after this ball and threw it the window. The unfortunate event that led to his death was that he fell out of the window and struck the ground. Reportedly, Ben is still present in the hotel, where he is reportedly playing games on the premises, by the pool, and in the hallways. In the event that visitors feel anything brushing against them or hear footsteps running around the corner of the floor, they will be able to determine whether or not the small child is around. And further former member of staff, similar to the night watchman, is hesitant to punch his final shift into the time clock. This individual is also a former employee. It is reported that there is a bellhop in the elevator on the main level who wears a beige coat and provides assistance to customers as well as recommendations for restaurants. Greg noted that, during his interactions with visitors, he often recommends that they visit this restaurant located on Water Street, or that they visit this location. It goes without saying that these establishments do not exist since he was employed a very long time ago. Lurks around the corner. Mighty Peace Tourism calls it spooky season. Halloween films and TV programs include ghosts, ghouls, and other supernatural creatures. Did you know Mighty Peace includes ghost stories? Mighty Peace Tourism recommends 5 local ghost tales to get you in the mood. Our first tales come from Dunvegan Valley, one of Canada's most haunted regions. Historic Dunvegan Provincial Park is 90 km north of Grande Prairie in Dunvegan Valley. In 1805, the Northwest Company founded Fort Dunvegan as a fur trading station on Satine, Beaver property. St. Charles Roman Catholic and St. Saviour Anglican missions were there. Beginning in the 20th century, fur trading stations and missions ceased. The Knights of Columbus and locals maintained the property. The valley last had market gardens in the 1940s. Dunvegan became a provincial park in 1956. The ferry service was replaced by the Dunvegan Suspension Bridge. Several historic structures in the area are claimed to be haunted. Dunvegan Valley and Rectory are renowned. Get cozy with blankets and use flashlights to create frightening shadows. Many have heard of the Grey Lady of Dunvegan, a ghostly apparition that fades into the mist. Let's clarify her narrative. 2 guys drove across the icy valley in November 1960, soon after the bridge was finished. They were astonished to see a lady bending into the whirling snow, with her head behind a hood as they carefully crossed the bridge. Though her cloak was comfortable, her bare feet were freezing. The guys slowed down to help, but she ignored them. To avoid stopping on the bridge, they crossed and stopped. One guy called out as he returned through the snow to check on her. However, the bridge was vacant. He had followed their tire tracks into the snow, but only saw his own. Both guys saw her despite no proof. They returned numerous nights with buddies to work on the bridge in hopes of seeing her again. They observed the guy again up a hill, gathering berries in the snow. They believed she was a spirit then. Another Dunvegan Bridge ghost story is much more obscure. According to legend, a spirit river man had a terrifying encounter with the ghost lady and never talked of it again. The ghost is often described as a nun, since she wears a nun's habit rather than a cloak. Why would a nun from Dunvegan's past haunt a late 1950s bridge? Why would somebody haunt Dunvegan Bridge? Another Dunvegan ghost is reported to haunt the ancient rectory in ancient Dunvegan Provincial Park. Legend has claimed that a visitor had retrocognition on the building's opening day. After taking a pen from the bishop's second-floor bedroom desk, she saw the room as it was, with a bearded priest writing a letter. Locals believe he is Alfred Campbell Garrioch, the rectory priest till 1891. As an author, Garrioch was the most famous of the 1113 priests who served the church before it dissolved. His 1929 novel, A Hatchet Mark in Duplicate, recounts his experience in Dunvegan. Others have seen lights in the second-floor windows and a priest's figure, or felt watched in the park. Many have attempted to photograph Dunvegan's ghosts, but they're camera-shy. Perhaps fittingly, historic Dunvegan has a few ghost tales as it holds Alberta's second-oldest fur trading structure. Village of Hines Creek lies near Dunvegan Valley. Hines Creek, named for early fur buyer Jack Hines, was a Northwest Company trapping site on the Peace River in the mid-1800s. Hines Creek and Jack Creek were named after him by the indigenous people. The 1930 Hines Creek Railroad defined the town site's position. Victoria, British Columbia, is guarded by a mystery Edwardian fortress on the west coast. Once home to James Dunsmuir, a powerful and rich provincial politician, Hatley Castle today houses Royal Roads University. He intended to retire and enjoy fishing, hunting, and golfing away from business and political life. Laura, his wife, craved attention, unlike James. She intended the interior to host her prominent guests, including local celebrities and British nobles. Laura adored these events and sang to her guests. The castle was erected in 18 months by Samuel McClure. Despite costing over $4 million, the structure fulfilled James and Laura their desires. The 50-room structure is 200 feet long, 86 feet broad, and has a medieval castle facade, Norman tower, and 2 Tudor Renaissance wings on each side. An outstanding 10-kilometer winding road winds across the 640-acre property. The beautiful rose, Japanese, and Italian gardens originally required 100 workers to maintain. James Dunsmuir was born to prosperous coal mine owner Robert. James studied mining engineering at Blacksburg, Virginia, where he married Laura Searles, the daughter of a famous farmer, to follow in his father's footsteps. After moving to Nanaimo, British Columbia, James became his father's mining manager and Laura a socialite. James was an effective manager. Production increased 350%. He also boosted maritime wharves and rail locomotives. The Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway was needed as the firm expanded. Robert became a provincial cabinet minister in 1883, giving James more corporate control. James drove development and earnings after opening a coal field in Comox. His father's mine north of Nanaimo took twice as long to produce coal as the mine did in 1890, its third year. James conquered the mining empire when Robert died in 1889. He expanded and improved mining and transportation. Esquimalt and Nanaimo Railway made its first profit. British Columbia's wealthiest family was the Dunsmuirs. At 69, James Dunsmuir died at his fishing lodge. Daughter Eleanor and Laura resided in the castle. Laura died in 1937, Eleanor 6 months later. After Laura's death, a maid felt watched while no one was there. Her emotions were so strong that she hesitated to enter several castle chambers alone. 3 years after Laura's death, the Defense Department bought the castle for $75,000 to use as a naval training center. Cadets and staff officers lived and ate in the castle at Royal Roads Military College. It was then that Laura became noticeable. The lads began reporting unusual incidents almost immediately after settling there. While studying late at night on the 2nd or 3rd level, cadets sometimes felt like they were surrounded in frigid cobwebs. They regularly saw a little elderly lady near their beds. The specter sometimes tore at their covers as they slept. Many thought it was Laura Dunsmuir's ghost. A cadet playing as a senior officer found the female ghost very unsettling. A pull on his legs woke him up early one morning. He was horrified to find the female ghost. He struggled to escape, but she held on. The lady vanished when he fled. Laura didn't enjoy the house full of lads. She may have been protecting them. She may have been attempting to have them expelled from school to avoid her son's destiny with her pranks. A lady on a Hatley Castle ghost tour in 2012 captured a female apparition. A vintage hat-wearing ethereal lady stands on the steps. Are the lights playing tricks, or is Laura Dunsmuir's ghost monitoring her house for visitors? Could one of the castle's other female ghosts be it? As a naval training college, cadets occasionally glimpsed a young lady roaming the castle corridors before leaving via a door or window. She sometimes cried in one room and floated out the window toward the sea. This window has opened and closed on its own for years. Annabelle, a young chambermaid who wooed Laura Dunsmuir, is sometimes identified as the disturbed spirit. Laura volunteered to pay for Annabelle's wedding. Groom tragically left young lady at altar. Annabelle discovered her fiancé was married with children. After being devastated, she returned to Hatley Castle and plunged to her death from a higher window. Some believe the ghostly apparition is cradling a baby. Visitors took more than memories from the castle. A young mother, husband, and daughter visited Hatley Castle in 2013. Nothing unusual happened, but when they arrived home, strange things happened. A baby's sobbing awakened the tourist and her husband early the next morning. They ran to their daughter's room in fear, but found her asleep. It happened again. The mother promptly checked on her peaceful, protected daughter. She heard wailing in her room and realized it was the baby monitor. She was horrified to see the monitor disconnected and batteryless. To sleep, she moved it to another room. Her workplace had more unusual events, boxes dropping suddenly and other issues. The couple consulted a psychic, who informed them the castle nanny's spirit had followed them home. Good thing the restless spirit left them, witnessing James Jr.'s spirit roaming the castle. He's wearing his military uniform and staring at his sister like, "Everything is all right, Dola." He vanishes as she rushes to him. People are still astonished to see a young guy in a WWI military uniform going through the gardens or up from the lagoon. Burton Cummings Theatrical for the Performing Arts, formerly the Walker Theatre, is a Winnipeg theatrical grande dame. It opened with Puccini's new opera, Madama Butterfly, on February 18, 1907. Corliss Powers Walker and Harriet Walker, expatriate entrepreneurs, wanted to offer Winnipeg the greatest concerts. The pair booked the most popular European and Eastern U.S. performances. Many Winnipeggers first saw the symphony, opera, musicals, and ballet there. Harry Houdini, Bob Hope, Louis Armstrong, and Jimmy Durante performed at the Walker. Many notable community activities took place at the Walker. An early suffragette, Harriet Walker helped Nellie McClung host her Women's Parliament at the Walker. The Walkers supported their community beyond women's rights. To maximize theatrical attendance, they added a second balcony to the theater. This balcony became known as the Gods, since customers sat so high, they must have been with the gods. Tickets for the Gods were 25 cents, making it accessible to those who could not afford the theater. During a solo or small group rehearsal, performers have heard the gods applauding as if an invisible throng was witnessing a concert. Many more unusual things happen in the theater, especially at night when just the security officers are there. Doors that should be open are closed without reason. Normally, well-behaved guard dogs at other work sites will bark at nothing and refuse to enter specific theater areas. Lawrence Irving and Mabel Hackney, prominent English actors, are blamed for the Walker Theatre haunting. After a successful North American tour, they performed at the Walker Theatre, which was just 7 years old. The handsome 42-year-old son of Sir Henry Irving, the first stage performer knighted, had booked passage home to London via Liverpool on the Corsican, but a friend convinced them to transfer to the larger Canadian Pacific sister ship, Empress of Ireland. They would fail. The Empress of Ireland sunk on May 29, 1914, killing over 1,000 people, including Lawrence and Mabel, the most famous. The deadliest marine tragedy in Canadian history. Winnipeg theatergoers were horrified and grieved by the deaths of players they had cheered the week before in Typhoon, The Unwritten Law, The Lily, and the first complete production of The Importance of Being Earnest. According to the Manitoba Free Press, Irving told the audience that he was leaving with only the best memories and will return with a new play. Irving was last seen holding Hackney as the ship sank. Still holding a piece of his wife's nightdress, he was discovered dead. No one discovered 34-year-old Hackney. Their memory was honored with a shining copper plaque in the Walker lobby after the disaster. Irving and Hackney returned as house ghosts of the Smith Street Theater where they last played, causing strange whisperings, clapping, and ghostly sightings. New Westminster's Glenbrook Ravine Park border grass seems innocuous from afar. It is hidden behind a large apartment and Elders Center complex by a modest metal gate with a sign. Dog walkers and youngsters seldom notice. For over 70 years, it was known as Boot Hill, and at least 43, or 47, or 62, depending on who you ask, condemned inmates from the adjacent, long-demolished Provincial Penitentiary were buried there. Child molesters, murderers, petty criminals, bullies, and BC Doukhobors were among them. Several of their bones are in unmarked graves and stone markers with prisoner numbers. Boot Hill presumably received its first body about 1913, although the BC Penitentiary had been the province's first highest security facility since the late 1870s. The ravine was home to a park and government house before construction. This hill would make a beautiful old park. In 1859, Colonel Moody wrote the governor, "I defend people in Park's beautiful glen and valley. I hope you like Queen's Ravine." In his 1879 report, the exasperated federal penitentiary inspector wrote that, "It needs no argument to show how incongruous, how repugnant to good taste, leaving aside the incentive to breach of discipline and escape, it were sick to have games, music, and dancing and other amusements, with all the attendant boisterous mirth, because prisoners could see park picnics. Unclaimed criminals' remains were donated to medical colleges or deposited in Douglas Road cemetery sites before Boot Hill, which was expensive and time-consuming, requiring guarded inmates to dig through pine roots for 3 days. Gin O. Kim's 1914 gravestone is the cemetery's oldest, although Joseph Smith and Herman Wilson were buried unmarked the year before. Smith, a small, stocky 24-year-old sailor, was serving 10 years for theft and violence in 1911 after dumping ammonia on a Main Street jewelry shop owner. Smith and Wilson murdered a prison guard during a jailbreak, which the New Westminster British Columbian termed one of the most skillful and dangerously near successful attempts at jail delivery that has ever been recorded. After defeating 3 guards, the couple was caught in a gunfight outside the external gate that killed J.H. Joynson and badly wounded Wilson. On January 31, 1913, Smith was hung in the yard, where Joynson fell, and Wilson died of a neck gunshot after jail authorities refused medical assistance. The British Columbian reported that, although physically a midget of a man, he displayed the same fearless front and iron nerve that had characterized his whole career, and more recently in his terrible attempt to escape from prison, in which he killed his guard. Throughout his trial and solitary confinement, until his last moment, the newspaper stated Smith was placed in his last resting place in a far corner of the penitentiary grounds where the world will soon forget him. Many Boot Hill prisoners committed suicide or contracted sickness. A 72-year-old petty criminal with 45 convictions died naturally in 1967. Boot Hill is a favorite getaway because convicts buried dead and carved headstones. According to the British Columbian, prisoner Philip Hopkins utilized his labor assignment to escape into the thick forest near the graves in March 1913. The gentleman bandit, Bill Miner, fled the prison's most renowned breakout in 1907 via the same underbrush before it was transformed into a cemetery. Miner was never discovered in Canada, despite province-wide searches. Miner's accomplice, Louis Colquhoun, died of TB in 1911 and may have been at Boot Hill. His body and memorial are gone. Famous Boot Hill inmate Suk Sias, prisoner Dorni 999, isn't in jail. Laich Quil Tach. First Nations member Sias from Greenpoint, BC, was twice convicted of murder and manslaughter. The cemetery contained his remains since 1933, but severe rains in 1955 undermined the gully and uncovered his coffin. In 2004, Campbell River historian Candy Lee Chickite found, disinterred, and returned Sias' corpse to his homeland after lengthy study. Other poor individuals die at BC Penitentiary besides Sias. 3 1933 Doukhobor prisoners died, including Thumr 4214 James Tarasov. The mid-20th century Doukhobor community protested police with public nudity and burning. To protest obligatory public education, over 600 Doukhobors were convicted of public nudity in 1931. To accommodate huge Doukhobor immigration, special prisons were erected. Doukhobors had Agassiz Mountain Prison by 1962. A 110-year-old BCI penitentiary was dismantled in 1980. The jail is almost gone save for Boot Hill, administration buildings, and the Gatehouse, now a restaurant. Former facility accountant Tony Martin saved the Boot Hill victims' identities by retrieving all historical documents from the garbage. During the process, I was told by a couple of friends that there were all kinds of things being sent to the dump, which they didn't think should be, Martin said, in a 2009 Old Courthouse, John Howard Society, Anthony Martin, BC Penitentiary Collection. Remember, I advised sidetracking, piggery barning, and checking on them later. Saved as much as possible from the landfill. Martin kept prison furniture, mug photographs, letters, and decades of official paperwork. Boot Hill was overgrown and neglected until 2018, when New Westminster historians requested the city to protect it. 1907 Kamloops, British Columbia, Tranquille Sanatorium treated TB, often known as the White Plague. Before the British Columbian government bought the site for the hospital, it was used for ranching. At the height of the pandemic, the King Edward VII Sanatorium treated TB patients. The British Columbia Society for the Prevention and Treatment of Consumption and Other Forms of Tuberculosis initially met in January 1904 to plan and fundraise for an isolated sanatorium. They found a land for sale and raised $58,000 to buy 600 acres from William Fortune's family. In addition, they leased 2,000 acres from the Dominion government, creating Tranquille Sanatorium. Our New York ghost tour takes you to the most haunted sites in the state in a hop, skip, and leap. The hospital began in November 1907 and had 12 attendants and 4 nurses by 1910, accommodating 49 patients. Sanatorium beds reached 360. About half of Tranquille's guests paid. Patients spend $55 a month and stay 200 days on average. The institution used to forbid patients from opening tossed mail and force them to labor without pay as therapeutic. Patients could not receive food, money, clothes, or other gifts from visitors. Tranquille, a tiny town near the hospital, developed during the 1900s TB pandemic. This little town contained homes, gardens, a gym, a farm, a fire station, and more. The Kirkbride architecture, inspired by 19th century physician Dr. Thomas Story Kirkbride, was used in sanatoriums with batwing floor plans and extensive gardens. For decades, Kirkbride asylums like Ohio's Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum featured animals, gardens, and agricultural fields. It had an orchard, dairy, steam heat plant, and carriage business. The farm's daily work was mostly done by hospital patients. The Kirkbride plan saw skilled labor as rehabilitation and economic benefit to the state. In 1959, Tranquille Sanatorium reopened to treat mental illness after closing in 1958. After closing completely in 1983, it temporarily housed juvenile offenders into the 1990s. In September 1991, A&A Foods owner Giovanni Camporese acquired the site to build a resort and dubbed it Padova City after his country. The property was planned for destruction, but the government and Camporese's 1997 court challenge thwarted his ambitions. The abandoned sanatorium is now Tranquille Farm Fresh, rich farmland. The ancient sanatorium offers escape rooms and history excursions. The property has hosted films including The A-Team and Firewall. Tranquille attracts tourists from over the globe, particularly those interested in its haunts. On Canada's most haunted list, Tranquille Sanatorium has seen its share of tragedy and horror. Tuberculosis killed many at Tranquille. Tunnels beneath the property were used to convey dry supplies to the hospital and remains to the cemetery. This was supposed to be healthier for the mental health of the struggling patients, since they shouldn't witness bodies leaving the facility regularly. Today's sanatorium visitors come for a touristy thrill, but get much more. Some visitors have reported seeing apparitions and orbs flying over the huge hospital's grounds and halls, as well as disembodied moans and groans, not part of the history tour. The Ohio-Athens Lunatic Asylum hauntings resemble Tranquille's. Many people died in and around the institution, but few stood out. One describes Margaret Schilling, a patient who vanished on December 1, 1978. She was found dead in a neglected ward in January the following year. The autopsy proved she died of heart failure, yet she was discovered identified and her clothes folded. The persistent floor stain her corpse left behind, unaffected by cleanings, is more intriguing. Her ghost has been observed peering down from the window of the room where her corpse was discovered, trying escape, and wandering the premises at night. Other ex-patients are believed to have remained, appearing as full-bodied apparitions in the hospital's vacant wings, screaming. Squeaking gurneys, odd lights, and cries are common.